Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Lifestyle Lifters Show. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Tom Otton. Tom is the founder and managing director of Great Media Group in Dubai, but Tom is also an endurance runner and a TEDx speaker. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, mate. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and thanks for the invite.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And Tom, before I get you to share a bit about your backstory, what got you into the endurance world, share something about yourself. And I know you have your own podcast, you've been on a lot of podcasts, but share something about yourself, Tom, that most people do not know.
Gosh, I didn't see that one coming. All right, where should we take this one? Really obscure. I was once in a hit Indian movie that was filmed in South Africa, and I was in a movie with Priyanka Chopra. That was quite a big Bollywood movie at the time, and that was about 20 years ago. So there's something completely random for you that most people
Oh my
don't.
God.
Yeah. The
How did
movie, the
you?
movie is called Andaz, with double AZ at the end. So for any of your listeners that are into Bollywood movies, then maybe they know that.
Maybe they know that. I certainly can't say I do, Tom, but
No, not many
that's
people do,
surely
mate. Not many people do.
that's an interesting one. Tom, let's dive straight into it. So, I mean,
Sure.
you've completed so many endurance events, crazy distances that it's actually even hard for me to fathom how far that you've run, how far that you've done these events for. So what actually got you into the endurance world in the first part? Would you mind just sharing a bit about your backstory and
Yeah.
how you got into it?
Yeah, sure, mate. There's a few different, I would say, building blocks to that kind of end result. As a kid, I was always super adventurous, always wanted to be out, always wanted to be exploring, always wanted to be getting lost. I've always loved nature and the outdoors. So I think there was a kind of a foundational curiosity, which I think curiosity is a key element with many people that go on to explore things to extreme, because you have to be constantly curious and constantly wanting more and exploring more. So that was a foundation. But then as I grew up, I didn't go down the endurance route as a child. I didn't get into cross country or anything like that, but I did get into rugby. So rugby was my life for many years. I played across the UK in various schools, and then fast forward university, and then I've been in Dubai for almost 20 years now. And I was playing for a local club here, and then a little bit on the international scene. And that's when I broke my knee. I was playing sevens for the country. I was over in Shanghai, got tackled, broke my knee, and that was pretty much the end of it. And for anyone that's gone through that process, they'll know that moving side to side is a problem that takes a little bit longer to figure out. But not too far down that recovery route, you can start to walk, obviously, and then you can start to jog in a straight line. Now, I was never particularly good at rugby, skill set wise, but I was always pretty fit. So I always did well in the fitness side of the game. And when I started running as part of my rehab, I was really enjoying it. I'd never really run just for the sake of running, and I was enjoying it. And at the same time, I was getting my business off the ground. So I started to realize that I could get into something that I could do on my own time without having the rigidity of training. You know, you've got to be there on a Wednesday night, you've got to be there on a Friday or there on a
Yes.
Saturday games. It's really structured being part of a rugby club. So I pulled back from that. I focused on the running, and I weaved that into my life in a much more convenient way when it came to the business side of things as well. So there was that side. The other side is a little bit certainly a little bit deeper. I was diagnosed with cancer quite a few years back, and it was early days of rugby. Actually, it was it was a tough time, but I was very fortunate to get through that without. I had an operation. I didn't have to go through chemotherapy or radiotherapy or any of those things, fortunately, for me. But it really did. It changed something internally. You know, when you sit across the table from a doctor and he uses words like survival rate and these sorts of things, and it really did have an impact on me. I didn't really realize how much of an impact, because I tried to bury it. I think many of us are guilty of this. Anything that's bad, you just try and get away from it, right? So I buried it. I pretended like it didn't happen for many years. But then I started to unpack it and realize there's real power there. So what that taught me was when I went through that process of really kind of going deep with that, was that life is very fragile, right? And we're only here for a short period of time. And I've done a TED talk on this. You referenced this off off air earlier, which was really all about kind of chasing experiences and making sure you're squeezing as much life out of life. So for me, post rugby, I really spent some time thinking about what do you want to do next, and it was very much this concept of squeezing as much as I could out of life, finding adventure, what adventure meant to me, and just kind of absorbing everything that we can whilst we're here. And running took me there, through ultra marathons in the most obscure places, some really interesting races from deserts to the Arctic and all over. And I'm sure we'll get into that, but that was it. It was this sort of basis of curiosity when I was a kid. Things that happened along the way. I was glad what happened with rugby. And if the cancer scare, if that hadn't happened, would I ended up with the life that I have now, which I'm very happy with. So I don't know if that would have happened either. So all these things happen for a reason, I suppose, and it's led me to where I am now, and I love what I do.
Wow, incredible. And it seems like, so just that cancer scare, Tom, it gave you just a lot of perspective on prioritizing creating experiences and actually maybe maxing out. Like, what did your life look like before that then? Would you say you were living to your utmost potential, or that you were leaving some of that behind you?
Yeah, I think that the best way to describe this, I would say, is that I suppose I've got a lot more, let's say, maturity around this. I'm quite a bit older now. When I look back on it, and I see with many people now, and I really try and hold myself accountable to this, but it's very easy to cruise into autopilot on life. And as I've got older, I've had to really catch myself sometimes doing the same thing, and I see it around me all the time that people are just kind of bumbling along, right? There's no real plan, there's no real goal, there's no real focus, there's no real sitting down and putting literally pen to paper to be like, what do I want out of life? What do I want out of this year? What do I want out of this decade? And really living life intentionally rather than just living life on autopilot. And I think if there's anything that it taught me, and that I've also realized through the other work that I've done since, it really is that message to make sure that you have some sort of a framework for living life. Like you have a goal, you're going in a certain direction. It gives you the ability to say no, because how do you say yes or no to certain things if you don't have a plan and you've got no particular place to be, nothing that you're aiming at. So how do you make sure that you're focused with what it is that makes you happy, going in the direction that you want to be going in, rather than just being dragged left and right by other people's intentionalities? So I think it's very much that. And then once you start to go down that route, you really start to think through, where do I want to be? What do I want to do? Who do I want to spend time with? How do I want to wake up in the morning? All these things, it all filters back from that same change of mindset, from being like, am I just going to cruise along, and if I get promoted, I get promoted, amazing. Rather than saying, well, what do I actually want from my career? And can I get it? Can I get it where I am? If I can, great. This is how I need to get there. These are the things I need to do, the people I need to speak to, the relationships I need to build, or I need to move somewhere else and it's going to look like this. So actually, rather than just hoping that life happens to you in the right way, actually showing up in life and saying, I want this is how I'm going to go and get it, and I'm going to be focused on going to get it, and then building life accordingly.
Yeah, really, really interesting what you said there. Particularly about living life in autopilot, because I can definitely be guilty of that at times, where it's like I can nearly predict in advance what my week is going to look like before it ever happens. And something I always come back to, Tom, Tony Robbins, in one of his books, he describes the six basic human needs. And one of them is the desire for certainty. Like, and that's where having structure, that's where having routine comes in. But then the next one, the complete opposite, uncertainty, and having surprises, having a change of scenery. And is that something you've ever dealt with, where as a business owner, I'm sure you probably need to have some element of structure to your week, but then you as you said yourself, life is all about experiences. How do you balance out the having the structure with also having that bit of variety so things are kept interesting?
That's a really good question, because it's trying to keep two
It's not
opposing forces. Yeah, right. So the way I approach that is the way that how to best describe this one. So if, for example, we see something happen to somebody in the news and we don't have context, right? And we think, wow, that thing happened to this person. They're so lucky, right? But if you actually, more often than not, outside of like winning the lottery, more often than not, if you actually dig in a little bit, there was a huge amount of preparation that got yourself or this person that you're referring to a certain point. So it's, what do they say? Luck is preparation meeting opportunity, right? So something like that. I might be butchering that, but
No, I think you have it spot on. Yeah.
okay, so and that's it, right? So it's like, when you get called up because someone gets injured and you get called up to a team, it's because you prepared your ass off. You put yourself in the best position for success. So when that opportunity came along, you were prepared for it. So that's how I approach life as well. And certainly, business takes me to many places, and it's quite challenging. I've got a company with almost 200 people in it, so I'm getting pulled different directions, whether it be client side or internally. But you have to have structure, right? It's a big organization. It's an organism. It's moving all the time. So you have to have structure. But at the same time, if you're so structured in your thinking about where the opportunity lies in the market, especially I work in the digital space. We're a digital communications agency. Now, the region I operate in the Middle East and the technology that I base my business on, changing all of the time. All the time, things are changing here. So we have to put ourselves in the best position, as in we're prepared, we're a well-oiled machine, we're a well-run company. We have to try and put ourselves in that position so when the opportunity comes up, we can grab it. Because if we're so focused on fixing all the chaos all the time, and it's the same for everybody's life, right? If your life is as organized as it can be, you're well structured without being anal about it, but you've got some structure in your day, you're in good shape, you're healthy, you're positive, your mind is in the right place, your body's in the right place, you've got your main inputs of life, your relationships are good, etc., etc. If you focused on those things and let's say the bottom of the pyramid of your life is strong, then you can reach out and grab opportunities that you wouldn't be able to reach to if you were dealing with chaos behind you. So maybe that's taking the risk of moving jobs because you know that, okay, well, if it doesn't work out, I'm not also fighting fires on every other area of my life. So, a lot of people will be somewhat fighting fires. It could be in a relationship that they're in. They really shouldn't be, because it sucks up so much of their mental capacity just dealing with chaos of a bad relationship, that they're not able to take new opportunities at work or drive something forward that could really flourish into something amazing, because they're over here fighting a fire. So the way that I approach it is just make sure that the base of that pyramid, the building blocks of your life, are as organized as they can be, so that you can take an opportunity whenever it comes past.
Amazing. Great answer, Tom. Oh, unreal, unreal. And so just to kind of pivot slightly then, when you speak about taking opportunities, what was your what was your transition into the endurance world? How did that initially start to where it's gone, where 230
Yeah.
kilometers in the Arctic Circle and Marathon de Sable and whatnot? How did
Yeah.
this all actually start for you, Tom?
Yeah, cool.
So you broke the knee, I know, sorry, in rugby,
Yeah.
and then your next transition, straight line running. How did you get
Yeah.
into the endurance world then?
Yeah, sure. So I started doing the running, and then I caught up with a mate of mine that has been a friend of mine for years, a guy called Marcus from a local company here, in a
I
fighter.
was uh, I was on his podcast two
Oh,
weeks
good.
ago. Yeah, yeah, great guy.
Yeah, yeah, he's a great guy. So I actually caught up with him in a coffee shop downtown, and I said, yeah, look, we were chatting about life and blah blah blah, and I was like, yeah, at some point I want to do a marathon. I think that would be a good idea, but wow, it felt so far away. I was like, like in 10 years' time, if I build up to it, I saw this marathon as this like almost impossible achievement, and I had no concept of how people ran for so far, because my running at the time was like 30 minutes, and I was absolutely broken at the end of it because I was obviously just running too fast, right? So I was like, I can't comprehend how people go for like 5 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, whatever. It just seemed so far, so remote. And he was like, there's a marathon in like, I think it was 6 or 8 weeks or something ridiculous like that. He's like, and I don't think I'd ever done more than 5K. So he was like, just sign up for it. Like, we had a chat about it. I was like, that's ridiculous. All the usual stuff comes out. Oh, excuses. No, I'm busy with this. I can't train, and blah 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 blah. And then sometimes you just gotta suck it up and put your ass on the line and see what happens. So I did that. And I'm grateful for his motivation when that all I suppose lit the fire. And then actually the race went really well. I had a plan, executed the plan. It went really well. I felt amazing finishing it. And I was like, holy shit, that was unbelievable. I was like, and then all my kind of wiring kicks in, and it's like, well, how far could you go?
Yeah.
You know, how fast could you go? And then you start being competitive and like, right, this is my thing, because you've got something you can constantly be iterating on and like positively moving forward. So whether it's distance or time or whatever. And I was like, this is cool. I enjoy this.
Sure.
And I felt that I was reasonable at it. So yeah, so the two of us then signed up for we signed up for this crazy, it was this race in Wales. Most people were walking it like a hike. It was called Trek Fest or something like that in mid Wales, like 80 kilometers across the Welsh mountains, beautiful scenery, like all of the weather that you can think of. And we went and ran that, and we did all right at it. But yeah, I had horrendous food poisoning the day before and blah blah blah. But anyway, so I went into it. I was literally taking Buscopan to stop cramps all the way through the race, and I didn't eat anything until I think about it must have been about the 50K mark or something. So I had no idea what I was doing, no concept of endurance running, no concept of nutrition. So it was a bit of a shit show for me, that race. And I got to the end of it and then was like, wow, I was almost like cringing. I was embarrassed about how I had shown up. I was whinging about stuff, complaining, and wasn't the person I wanted to be. And then yeah, that then led on to, I was like, I've got a choice here. I either pull back from this running and just pretend like it never happened and pretend like this, like it really sat on my shoulders. And when anybody asked me about it, I was just kind of shying away from it because it didn't go the way I wanted. But then again, there's power in that, right? So I used that to fuel what came next. And I was like, right, I need to get this kind of, I think the term is, monkey off my back. And I signed up for the Marathon des Sables, which is the 250K through the Sahara Desert. And it was, again, myself and Marcus, we went and did that the following year. And then, then life got a little bit different after that.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So with the Marathon des Sables, Tom, how do you, first of all, mentally, how do you
Yeah.
prepare for such an event where it's 250K in the Sahara Desert?
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty wild, mate. It's
With the risk of dying, I'm sure, from,
yeah,
dehydration, from being bit by a snake, whatever, what have you, like.
yeah, that's it, mate. And I'd watched a documentary from the year before, and it started off with someone dying in the heat, and you're like, holy shit, this is no joke. And it's the first thing I'd done that was like that level of extreme. So I didn't have all the kind of the mental models, the training, the mental capacity that I've built over the years since then. So going into that, I was just like, I was a bit shell shocked, and I knew I was pushing myself so far out of my comfort zone that I felt quite, obviously I felt uncomfortable. And to take your listeners through a short story with that. So you fly into Gatwick from all over the world, and then they charter a flight from Gatwick across to an area of Morocco, and then they put you on buses for 10 hours and out you go. But on that flight, because the only people that are on that flight are people that are doing that race, it's a pretty intense experience. So you got all these people that are like multiple Ironman, they got tattoos all over them with the Ironman logos, and just like, imagine like full like sports geek, running geek type. And I'm there thinking, Jesus, the last time I did any sort of distance in that previous race, I literally fell to pieces. And now I'm here trying to get through the Marathon des Sables, and it was just, it was a bit of a, it was tough to deal with. So I knew that, okay, I've done a decent amount of training, far more than I'd done for the previous race. So I was like, I'm competent in that space. I feel like I can, I don't know what I'm getting into, but I feel fit, I feel strong, I feel capable to an extent. But I knew that the real problem or the real challenge was going to be the mental space, right? Because you're going to break in your head far earlier than you're going to break in your body. And that's, that's been proven time again. So I spent a lot more time in the lead up to it, really kind of focusing on how bad is it going to be? What am I going to do when I get there? What's important to me? Why am I doing this? But one of the things, and here's something that's more of a takeaway. I want this to be as kind of useful as possible to your listeners. I knew that there was going to be a point where I'd want to stop. Or I knew that there would be a point where I was like a breaking point where I was like, this is it. Like, I'm fucking done. I don't want to do this anymore. I knew it was going to be at some point horrific. So I planned for that. I sat and I thought about it before I got there. I didn't wait to get to that point to then think, what should I do? I had to make the decision before I got there. So I started to think through, again, going back to like, why am I there? What do I want to do? What is it going to feel like when I get out of this? Because everything finishes. And when I finish, what's it going to feel like if I bailed on this thing? How am I going to go back and see my friends and family? And I used all of the tricks, right? And this is what you have to do when you're pushing yourself to breaking point. You use your ego. So you can use your ego in a really positive way to say, well, do I want to be the guy that's having the 50 conversations that are going to happen post this race? They're either going to be positive or they're going to be negative, because everybody's going to want to know. This is quite early days of ultra running. It's a far smaller community. So coming back in and plugging into kind of normal community here in Dubai, I knew like people were following. We had loads of people following us. We were in the papers, and there was a big kind of a push behind it, like in the media and things. So I knew I was going to have to come back and have a bunch of conversations. And I said to myself, are you going to want to have to explain time and time again why you didn't do this, why you bailed, why you broke? Or are you going to want to talk about how you completed it, what you needed to do to get to the end, and blah, 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 blah. So you use your ego in that way, because nobody wants to have those 50 conversations that are just really negative. So it's utilizing all these sorts of tools so that when the shit's really hitting the fan, and whatever that looks like, you're there and you're like, okay, I knew this was coming. I know why I'm here. I know why I need to finish. And you really dial into that. And that's what pulled me through when I was staring at my watch and I was wiping the face of it, because there was so much sweat coming off my face. I was wiping my watch face repeatedly to try and read it. And it was 50 degrees and I was in the sun, in just endless sand dunes, like in a valley. And I was just like, this is fucking wild. So it was, it was an interesting experience.
Wow. And I actually moved to Dubai 2 months ago, or for 2 months this year. And I mean, even just walking in that sun, in that
Yeah.
heat at 40, 45 degrees,
Yeah.
I'd walk to the gym every morning, Tom. And by the time I got to the gym, you'd think that I had a workout done. The
Yeah.
sweat would be dripping down me. So to
Yeah.
actually run in that, I mean, it's just taking it to a new extreme. I heard you speak about on another podcast about that remove the option mentality there,
Yeah.
which you're essentially just alluding to. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
is that something that you maybe just talk us through that a bit more, Tom? I think there's a lot of power in that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's removing the option is about making the decision before you get there, right? So
Yeah.
it's as simple as that. So many of these mental models, so many of these sort of ways of showing up and dealing with difficult situations are really simple. They're simple but not easy, and that's the big takeaway, right? Like none of this stuff is easy. It's very simple to say, oh, okay, well, you just make the decision before you get there, and when you get there, you've already made the decision. It couldn't be more basic, but actually implementing that is what's difficult, right? So it's the same thing. Your alarm goes off in the morning. Those of us that are like geared towards like getting up and getting shit done, you're not going to be like, I'm going to go to bed. I'm going to set my alarm for like 4:35 in the morning, and I'm going to see how I feel when I wake up, because that's never going to work for you, right? Every single time you're going to be like, oh, I need more sleep because of this, and I've got this on, and I need to do this. But sometimes you need to set your alarm for 3 a.m. because you've got to drive to the mountains and run for 2 hours. And like, you have to make that decision before you go to bed. So it's removing the option when you get there. So they're slightly different, but very similar concepts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all get that every morning, Tom, when you hear the alarm go off, particularly in the winter, the cold winter mornings, you want to stay
Yeah,
under the sheets.
that's it. In the UK, it's a little bit
Decide,
different, right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, decide in advance. And just of all the endurance events that you did so far, what would you say have been like the top three most challenging for you, Tom? Would the Marathon des Sables be one, or was there even more?
Yeah, definitely more. There's definitely more challenging. So it's also got to take into context of like when they were done, right? So where I was in my life and kind of my process of development. So going into Marathon des Sables MDS I was going in super green, super fresh, and scraped through it, but then learned a huge amount from that process that then helped me with subsequent things, whether that be business and building a company or going through other endurance events. So I took a huge amount from that race. Because it was my first one, it was life-changing for me, because I came back with different mental models, like, understanding the simplicity of a decision and a direction. And when you're building a business, you're getting pulled in many different directions. There'll be fires going on everywhere all of the time. And your role is to identify, A, where do I want to go? And B, which is the fire that's going to stop me from getting there? The rest of it is just noise. So when you're dealing with something like, I could be sitting in the office and 5 or 6 people come in, they've all got a different problem. I can only deal with one thing at a time. So I need to understand and make a very quick call, which is the one thing that's going to bring the house down, that's going to take me off course. I got to deal with that one first. The rest of it is just noise. Even if it's the number one priority for the person in front of me, it's not my priority. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's like, if you don't know where you're going, then everybody else's priority becomes yours, because you've got no reason for it not to be, because you've got nowhere else to go. So in the same way in business, we set a strategy and a direction, and this is where we want to be, then you can make a decision about how you deal with things or don't. It's the same thing in our personal lives, right? So you have to have a North Star, a direction, a plan, because otherwise you just get pulled left and right by everybody else. I digress a little bit. So MDS taught me a lot, but then moving the two big races that have been, yeah, I would say peak for me were one was in the mountains of Oman, just down the road here from Dubai. It was 137 kilometers straight, and that was the first time I'd done a really long single stage. So yeah, I think it was almost 140K. We started at 7 p.m. in the evening, so we went through the night, through the day, through the night again, and then I finished at like 10 or 11 o'clock the morning on the God, whatever day that was, second the second or third day, whatever. But that was just a wild experience, because it was the hallucinations, the something like 50-60% of the number of participants dropped out. So it was actually really dispersed, that race. So I spent hours and hours on my own, especially on the second night, because so many had dropped out by then, that it was just hours alone on a mountain with a head
without
torch.
any sleep, without any sleep at all.
Yeah, no sleep. I mean, we got to the 120K mark. I keep saying we, I was on my own. I got to the 120K mark, and I had a 1.2 kilometer climb over kind of a 3 kilometer distance. And at one point I was shimmying around a rock. And it was, at the time it was down, it was below 10 degrees. It was, it was windy, and, I had 120 Ks in my legs. And was hallucinating to be like, I thought I was hearing noises and all sorts of weird stuff. So that was pretty scary, because I mean, there was a 600-meter drop behind me, and it was like less than a meter back. So I was like, at one point I was physically frozen to the rock, thinking, I actually don't know how to get out of this, because you start to spiral, and then you really have to kind of get control of your mind, slow things down, take it bit by bit, just like, don't start panicking, because otherwise, like, you're never going to get through this. So you have to really sometimes really catch yourself when you start to panic, because as soon as that happens, you spiral and you make bad decisions. So things like that happened, which were pretty wild. And also just the state that your mind is in when you go through 2 nights and you're not sleeping. Your mind is doing everything that it can to shut your body down, because it knows it needs sleep. So it starts trying to trick you into things. Your mind wanders off in terms of your thoughts are in weird places. You're almost like dreaming whilst you're awake, because your brain thinks it's supposed to be asleep, and it's a really weird experience. That was fun. And then the more recent one was going through the Arctic. So it's 230 kilometers through the Arctic in February in northern Sweden. So just smashing through snow for 230K, which was a whole different set of experiences, which was it was amazing.
Sorry, Tom, was that over a few days, or was
So that was so that was a multi-stage. That's over 5 days.
Okay.
If you tried to do that in one go, I think you'd be dead.
Yeah.
So because when it gets down to like minus 35, literally the environment is trying to kill you. So there's limited exposure even in endurance races. But we know the longest day was still, gosh, what was the longest day? I think about 65K, something like that. So still a decent day out there from like pre-dawn to after sunset. But yeah, just wild experience. So just and a whole new set. It almost felt like I was doing my first race again, because everything that you've been taught about running goes out the window when you go into the Arctic and in like Arctic temperatures. So just the concept of how your body reacts, what will pull you out of the race is not something that would in a different race. So for example, no matter how hot it gets in a desert, you can sit under a tree for half an hour if you need to, right? And just drink some water, cool your body down. Like there's always something you can do. The second you stop moving in the Arctic, your body's starting to shut down, because all of your gear, although it's lighter than you would think, when your body is producing the heat because you're moving, you're just hustling along with your poles and all the rest of it, your body's producing enough heat to keep itself warm. So even in minus 20, sometimes you don't actually feel that cold, even if, mostly as long as there's no wind, because that cuts through everything. But the reality is, as soon as you stop, then all of a sudden you just start getting cold very quickly, and then start to get slow. So yeah, pretty wild experience, that one.
And just with running in general, obviously you ran the marathon, that was a road race. How did it differ running on the sand and then running on the ice? Like that was surely just felt weird in your feet above all else.
So surprisingly similar, the sand and the ice, because you're just slipping all over the place, right? So although the technique is slightly different, when yeah, there's a lot of similarities as well. So for example, I was training with snowshoes on the sand,
Yeah.
because there's, it sinks in, it moves around, it's similar. So there is some similarities with that. The tricky thing with the ice is every 20 meters the terrain can change, because ice, I mean, I think the Sami people are the regional people in northern Sweden and nearby countries. I think they've got something like 20 or 30 different terms for snow and for ice, because they are actually so different, right? So if it's slightly like this, or it's slightly sticky, or it's slightly more slushy, or it's slightly more, so it's all different types of ice. So when you're doing a distance like that of like 230K and you're going over mountains, through forests, across lakes that are like 20 kilometers along a lake where you just don't see anything apart from barely seeing the sides, and you feel like you're literally some Arctic tundra. It can be lumpy where your feet are moving all over the place. It can be quite hard packed where you can actually start to run properly. It can be slushy, so some of the lakes, there's no real risk of it breaking, but somehow the water gets kind of on top of the ice, and you can be going through slush as well, which is obviously a problem when it's that cold. So yeah, it's an interesting experience for sure.
Oh, wow. And how do you, just will say with you spoke with the mental preparation. What
Yeah.
about from a training and nutrition standpoint, Tom? I mean, you hardly run 100 kilometers or 50-kilometer days consecutively, because that can even add up. How do you actually physically prepare for events like this? What would a typical week of training look like?
Sure. So it's tough to say a typical week because it just changes so often, right? So
Yeah,
depending on how I'm gearing up for a particular race, what that race looks like beforehand, it's going to be fairly general. So let's say if I'm 3 months out, it's building out base fitness. So you're doing a long, like let's say two long runs a week. So generally that's kind of how it would look, with a track session on a Tuesday as well. So just a really high intensity sprint work around the track with my running club. There'll be a tempo run in there somewhere. So normally on a Thursday we do a tempo, and then I'll be doing a longer run on a Saturday and a Sunday, or that would alternate as well. So maybe it's just a Saturday, just to make sure that kind of periodization is in play there and working.
what would you classify as a longer run for events like this?
Sure. So, I mean, the stuff I'm doing now will be about 3 hours. I'm quite close to my event now. So I'm doing 3 hours on a Saturday and 2 hours on a Sunday to get kind of 5 hours in over the weekend.
Yeah,
But if I'm further out, then it will be less. Obviously, I build up
sure. Yeah,
towards that. And then as I get closer to the race, it's more specific. So I look at, okay, what is the terrain I'm running on? What is the actual course profile? Okay, so this particular race I've got coming up, I've got two particular climbs. So I will replicate those climbs in my training so that my body is prepared for that. I've
yeah,
got to run X on relatively flat. And then I know I'm going to be doing this kind of a 1.2 kilometer climb over X distance. I will try and replicate that. And
sure. That makes
I'll
sense.
do that in the weekends building up to it. So by the time I get there, my body I should have done all the baseline fitness. I should have done the more specialist training. So making sure
Yeah,
that I'm running on the same terrain. So my stabilization muscles and all these smaller important things are there. Because if you just do all your training on a road, for example, and then you go try and run, you'll do okay for a period of time. But then all the stabilization that you haven't been working on will start to scream.
catch up with you. Yeah.
Yeah, and then your lower legs are going to be a right mess, and that could pull you out.
And do you do strength work then on top of this, Tom?
Yeah, so that was just the running side of stuff. Outside of that, I've got two strength sessions a week. So one is with a strength coach. Everything that's compound movements, everything very very kind of baseline, and then the other session would be more focused specifically on running. But that's generally how it's working. So it will be, what am I doing? Sort of a lot of single leg work, a lot of deadlifts, a lot of core work, stabilization on my knees, ankles, just making sure that my core is as strong as it can be, to make sure that I'm working on the trails and everything's kept as balanced as possible. But I need to do foundational strength as well, right? So
Of course, yeah.
still the big yeah, the big compound movements that can build up that base level of strength, because that's what I'm going to be relying on in the latter stages of the race, to make sure that my body's not tiring out too soon.
For sure. And with your nutrition then,
Yeah.
do you have to do you count calories to make sure that you're eating the right amount, or what does a typical day's eating look like for you?
Sure. So I use more of a guide. I don't sort of count so much. Yeah, I'm not anal about that, but obviously I've got I wear a garment, so I've got an understanding of what I've just done in training, and what my day would look like from in terms of a calorie burn. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm certainly eating to that level, which is a bit of a challenge sometimes, because I'm always bouncing around with work and meetings and these sorts of
Yeah,
things. So I go through different phases of working with let's say a food prep company, or just doing my own
yeah,
thing. But just trying to make sure that I'm getting. I eat very clean, so I don't eat any junk food. I don't get shitty calories in. So that can also be a challenge, because when you're trying to get up to the higher level of calories, but
yes,
you're
yeah,
only eating good food,
yeah.
it's just trying to get it into your body. So that can be a challenge sometimes. Definitely, that would be an area of improvement for me. But I would say the core thing is making sure that the challenge I have is always getting enough protein in as well.
Nutrient dense, yeah,
Yeah, and
nutrient
it's
dense and protein.
exactly. So I've got a really good a supplement that I use that starts my day, which is Maximum Vibrance. I don't know if you've heard about that, but super dense green drink, essentially from the US. I've been having that for, gosh, I don't know, 5 or 6 years now. I've been drinking that stuff, and my immune system is absolutely bulletproof. So I do start with that, and then I focus on a variety of things. More recently, I'm utilizing, what is that? Unbroken. I've been using those quite a lot. That seems I feel that helps. And then just getting high quality protein. So that can be coming from a number of sources. I don't use whey protein or anything like that. So all my protein would be plant based or meat. So that's kind of how I build it up, and just make sure that I'm just eating healthy and consistently, and also not. I'm a little bit older, so it's also about longevity, right? So I want to be eating
For
really
sure. Yeah,
really healthy foods. I've gone through phases of just like anything with high protein in it. It's processed, it's not processed. Like I'll just get it in because I'm trying to hit my macros or whatever. That was when I was much younger. Now I'm much more focused on holistic health. Running is a part of that, but I'm certainly trying not to detriment my health just to hit certain numbers or hit a plan or anything like that. Like it's more important to have whole foods.
for
For me,
sure.
to make sure I'm doing it properly.
Yeah, for sure. The analogy I like to use with that, Tom, is like I know calories are the most important thing for fat loss, but the type of food and the makeup of those calories determines how you look and how you feel.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
for anyone there, I'm sure we've all had four slices of toast or four slices of pizza in a row. But I doubt anyone listening, or even you, Tom, has had four apples in a row. Yet
Yeah,
four apples has fewer calories than four slices of pizza. So
yeah, absolutely.
it's those hyper
Yeah,
palatable foods that are easy to eat a lot of that aren't very nutrient dense.
yeah,
Amazing stuff. Just before we wrap it up, Tom, I know the way you mentioned before, and this is something I wanted to ask you about, that you had a pretty severe injury after one of your races where you couldn't run for 10 months.
yeah,
And for someone who it seems like you wrap a lot of your identity and you get a lot of purpose from, doing these endurance events, how do you deal with a setback like that where something so big and so meaningful for you is taken from you and you're pretty much, out for a year from doing it?
yeah. Mate, it's this can happen to any of us at any time, right? So you can lose a job that was your identity. You can become injured or sick for a period of time, and unfortunately, many people do, right? With chronic illness, with injury, with all these types of things. People take big setbacks. I venture to say that every single person listening to this has gone through a significant setback in their life, right? So, it happens to all of us. So, my focus in terms of how I'm maybe leveraging endurance, or certainly how I'm trying to build my mindset in terms of my approach to life, is that we should be prepared for these things, right? We should be spending time building our mental resilience so that when the situation happens, you can deal with it. Because it will happen to all of us. Parents will pass away. Every single one of us is going to go through that. It's natural human cycle, right? At that point, it's going to be devastating. So when you get to that point, this isn't an if, it's a when, right? So if we're going to go as dark as that, like that would be one of the worst things that will happen to all of us, right? But people will coast through life trying to make it as comfortable and as easy as possible, with even though they have the knowledge that they're going to have to face really dark days. I would rather say, I know I'm going to face really dark days. I'm going to spend my time building my capacity and capabilities and mental resilience so that when they come, I can still stand tall for those that are around me if they need that, or I can still stand tall for myself when I have to deal with, adversity in one way or another. So in terms of approaching that, it's critical that we focus on building those mental models so that we can deal with those situations. For me, really, when I zoom out and look at not being able to run, running is a thing that I do. It's not my identity. It's something that I love to do, but I am me. I show up in many different ways, and sometimes it's weird and wonderful ways in terms of, in different ecosystems with different groups of people, and I'll show up in different ways in all of those. And if one of those gets taken away from me, there are other areas of my life.
Yeah.
So, I get to spend more time at home with family. I also have other things I can control. Okay, my core is not strong enough. Cool, now it is, because I focused on the areas that I could focus on, right? I fixed other things. So when I come back, I'm like, I'm actually a better runner, even though I just lost 10 months. It's taken me time to build back. But what an amazing experience building back from, I can't get out of bed in the morning because my back is so bad, and I'm rolling onto the floor to do floor work for 30, 40 minutes before going to work. Like from that to running along a peak in the Alps, just flying as fast as I can go, as fast as I can get my feet to go, with not even an inkling of pain. To go from that to that, what an incredible journey. Maybe if I hadn't gone down, then I couldn't go up either, right? So it's just how you approach these things. It's not like I said, it's not if, it's when. So get ready for it.
And just with that, getting ready for it, what does that look like in practice? Is that meditation? Is it visualization? I know you mentioned before in one of your posts you're a fan of Stoicism and Ryan Holiday. How do
Yeah,
you actually put that into practice and prepare for it?
I think it's sitting with those concepts, right?
Yeah,
Spending time. We probably all know a lot of people that'll fly through a book and can probably recite a whole bunch of cool quotes, but are they actually internalizing this? And this is the difference. You can go book after book after book after book, but if you're not actually changing the way that you think or the way you act or how you make decisions,
yeah,
then reading that book was just a complete waste of time. So for me, it's understanding, like, Stoic philosophy, and a really easy way into that is Ryan Holiday's books. It's actually spending time with those concepts, and also just as you absorb, if you operate in a certain ecosystem where you're speaking to like-minded people, you're reading those sorts of books, you're absorbing those sorts of podcasts, you spend time kind of, it's osmosis. It starts to change the way you think, or something happens and all of a sudden, something pops up from your memory because you read a book about blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden you start to think that way. And then it starts to shape how you think day to day and who you are and how you show up. So it's not reading 100 books. It might be reading 2 books and actually internalizing those things and just saying, like, this is a really cool concept. Next time I'm in this sort of situation, or something looks like this, or I feel like this is the thing I'm going to come back to, because this is really smart. This is going to make me happier. It's going to make me less stressed. It's going to make me put all of these things into perspective. And one of the key things that I took away from all of this kind of work that I've done over the years is the concept of reframing. And it's so simple, because nothing needs to change apart from the way you look at it, right? And yeah, there are core elements to Stoicism in this, but the situation doesn't need to change. But we've all gone through this without even realizing that it's something that's really like stressing you out. I'm really upset about blah, blah, blah. And then you, like, all of a sudden you just think about the same thing slightly differently. And you're like, it just drains. The stress drains from you. You've got to take lessons from that. Like, you created all the stress, and you created the situation which removed the stress. The thing did not change. The person didn't say something different. The outcome did not change. It's just your way of approaching it. So sometimes,
perspective,
that's it. And just like, whether it's your injury, whether it's somebody upsetting you, just reframing that to be like, oh, well, like, there's another way of looking at it, which makes me feel a lot better about things. And I'm going to go down that route. Even if my ego is telling me to go left, I'm going to pull myself right. And you know what? Let that person be that person. And, I'm still happy.
Amazing. I absolutely love that. Yeah, that's just so powerful. Everything you've said there really,
Mm.
really hit home. Just with takeaways from the book to your perspective, to your mindset. I assume you've read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, or you probably heard some of the takeaways from it.
Yeah, I've not read that book.
I actually haven't fully read it either, but just basically the guy who was he was in World War II,
Mm.
and just his perspective on life, despite having these horrendous living conditions, the
Yeah.
people that kind of thought they'd be out by Christmas, living in that false hope. And then when
Yeah.
Christmas came, like slowly afterwards, I think they passed away. Whereas his perspective was more so long term and just being grateful for the small everyday things and changing your perspective. So it just goes to show two people can encounter the exact same experience. We could be both caught in traffic,
Yeah.
and it could be an opportunity for one person to say, well, you know what, now I get to listen to my podcast for an extra 30 minutes. And
Yeah.
somebody else is beeping their horn saying, I'm
Yeah, that's
stressed,
it.
I'm late for work.
That's
What
it.
can I do about it, man? That is amazing. Tom, I want to wrap this up. And I'm really grateful for your time. Just very, very briefly, what's something you're excited about? I know you've a race coming up shortly.
Yeah, I mean the races for sure, but my wife's also giving birth to our little boy in in a few months, so in
Wow.
December. Yeah,
Congratulations.
thanks, man. I'm trying to figure out how to take this kind of thinking and all the things that we've discussed today, but how do you actually turn
Yeah.
into a lesson for a child, and how is that done? So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that challenge, and I'm hoping it kind of I think there's a book coming there somewhere for yeah, how do you raise a child in that way? So I'm going to I'm going to try and map that out for people.
Unbelievable. Amazing. Amazing. Tom, thank you
Cool.
so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. And to finish the show, because this is the Lifestyle Lifter show, I always ask one final question, and that is, what is your definition, Tom, of living a successful lifestyle?
Oh, big question. So what is my definition of living a successful lifestyle? I would say that it is living on your own terms whilst also being of service. I think that would be a short definition of that. I think all of us want essentially financial freedom,
Yeah,
freedom of time. All of us want these things, right? So it's how you carve that out. It doesn't necessarily mean financial freedom to do whatever you want, but at least you can enjoy some of the things that you want to do. It doesn't mean
without
that you
stress.
can
Yeah,
yeah, it doesn't mean you can jet off around the world at all times, but sometimes you can find time to be like, I'm doing this on my terms. So I think it's living on your own terms, whatever that means to you, but also being of service to others, because I believe that contribution to society and community is inherently what makes humans feel good. Everybody wants to be of service. Everybody wants to be of value. And if all of us could have the mindset of the world will be a better place because you were here, and that could be this much, or it could be, a name in a book, and anything in between. But if the world is slightly better because each of us were here and we have that mindset of service and contribution, I think that would be a very successful life to live.
amazing. Amazing. Tom, thank you so much again for your time. I really, really do appreciate it. And for any of our listeners out there who want to learn more about you, about your racing, about your adventures and all of that, Tom, where's the best place to send them?
Yeah, but I would just say Instagram. Just posting life on stories on Instagram, which is at Tom Otton. Yeah, all the race stuff will be on there as well. So yeah, that'll probably be the best way. And if anybody wants to connect, I'm happy to chat.
Unbelievable. I'll post a link to your IG in the show notes. Tom, I really do appreciate your time again. This has been such an amazing conversation. I've taken a lot from it, and just thank you so much again for coming on.
Amazing. Thanks for the opportunity, mate. It was a real pleasure.